everybody.
Yes. Yes. There we go.
Here's some noise here.
All right. Thank you, Terry.
Just trying to warm them up for you, Bart.
That's my cue. Here we go. Welcome to George Mason University and the Schar School of Policy and Government. I'm Mark Rozelle. I serve as the Dean of the Schar School. As I think many of you know, we hold a number of forums, symposia, and candidate debates and other events here in Arlington and in Fairfax. And among those has been the Kingsley Haynes Lecture that has brought various distinguished public servants and scholars to our community for events such as this one tonight. Past speakers have been Francis Fukuyama, Alice Rivlin, Tom Davis, Tim Kaine, and most recently Charles and Linda Robb, interviewed by Brian Lamb of C-SPAN. The Haynes Lecture Series honors the legacy of Kingsley Haynes, who founded the Institute of Public Policy here in 1990, and it became the School of Public Policy, the predecessor unit of what is now the Schar School. He served as the dean of the school until 2010, almost 20 years. And while at Mason, Dean Haynes directed numerous research grants and contracts totaling over $50 million, co-authored or edited 5 books, and over 300 articles and professional reports published in leading professional journals and other outlets. He has received numerous awards from professional associations, lectured all over the world, and since retiring from Mason has held visiting scholar positions in Hong Kong and Macau, and continues to lecture internationally. So I want to acknowledge here tonight Kingsley and Susan Haynes, the inseparable team that led our policy school for 2 decades. Kingsley and Susan. I want to acknowledge in the audience tonight as well members of the Mason Board of Trustees, Todd House and Trevor Montano, and also members of the Board of Visitors, Horace Blackman and Lisa Zuccari and her family. Thank you very much for coming. Very appreciated. And thank you for everything you do to support George Mason University. And now, very quick introductions for those who are already well known here, and then we'll get right to the show. Terry McAuliffe served as 72nd Governor of Virginia from 2014 until 2018. He was chair of the Democratic National Committee from 2001 until 2005 and was co-chair of President Bill Clinton's 1996 re-election campaign and 1997 presidential inauguration. He also was chair of Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign. He currently serves as a distinguished visiting professor, most importantly, here at the Schar School. Thank you, Terry.
How about that? Forget all those other titles, man. That's
right.
the money.
I should have put that one first. So, Julie Carey is the Northern Virginia bureau chief for NBC News 4, where she has been covering Northern Virginia and Virginia politics for the network since 1992. She has covered the governor, the General Assembly, and every Virginia election since 1993. She is frequently called upon to participate in political debates involving Virginia candidates, and in fact, we've done a few together, Julie. And she has also done extensive reporting on various issues of regional interest and high-profile trials. She is a graduate of Indiana University with a journalism degree. So, Governor McAuliffe and Julie Carey, thank you very much, and I turn the platform over to the two of you.
And after covering a murder trial today, it is a pleasure to be here and to break away from that. For those of you who are WTOP listeners, and that's probably most of you, NBC4 has a partnership with WTOP, so that meant when the governor would come to WTOP every month, I would get to ask him questions. And so this is a real treat to resume that today. And when he would come every month, he was very clever about it. He would always have some breaking news for us. He would always have something to announce. So I'm going to give it a shot here tonight. So 2020, you said that you will decide whether to seek the Democratic nomination by the end of March. But what are you going to know between now and then that you don't already know? What's standing in your way of announcing tonight?
Well, listen, this has been a long process. I traveled the country extensively. I have a big political network out there and financial network ready to go. I've talked to my family. You know, this is a obviously very serious endeavor. And I wanted to take the time to go through it and deal with the policy issues. I'm meeting with other candidates. I'm spending a lot of time with Vice President Biden, just with him the other night, trying to figure out where he is to make sure there actually is a lane that you can actually get your message out. I think it's important, Julie, that we have a governor in the race. I think it's very important because, in all due respect to members of the Congress, governors actually every day are on the front line. They have to balance budgets, they have to create jobs, they got to build roads, they got to clean roads. I mean, it's an executive type job, and I think that's what you need as someone as president. So I'm looking at it very closely, and obviously if you're going to get in, you want to do it where you have a actually full quarter of fundraising and support. So, you know, I mean, I'm looking at if I do decide to do it, it would be around, you know, the first week of April.
Yeah, I was looking to your social media feed, and I saw those pictures with Vice President Joe Biden. You guys
Yeah.
were together the other night at the Irish Embassy for St. Patty's Day festivities.
Yeah.
What did he tell you about his plans? We know about his little slip-up over the weekend, but what did he share with you?
He's been pretty consistent. He keeps saying he's 95% there. It was fun. It was St. Patty's Day, and we had dinner with the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister, who's a fascinating individual. You know, it's the first gay prime minister, obviously, in Ireland history. And, you know, he met with a lot of the folks who maybe didn't have the same views he had on social issues, but he said, you know, judge me for what I do, which I think was very important. I think he had a great message while I was over here in the United States of America. And we sat, had a little Jameson. Vice President Biden does not drink. I don't know if you knew that. He's never had a drink, so I had to make up the difference. So had to have a couple for him, you know, whatever. But I think he's looking, he's 95%, but he hasn't made a 100% decision to do it. And that's what I'm really trying to talk to him about. I want to make sure that, and listen, my goal, number one, we got to beat Donald Trump. I think well, I mean, got a big crowd here. Okay, for some of you here. But listen, I'm not going to spend my time talking about Donald Trump, but I think we realize, you know, this country's going off the rails on so many issues. And we could spend all night doing that, which we won't do. But, you know, we've got to beat him, and that's got to be the number one. Jace, how are you? Folks are over here. Yeah, come on over. You're late. Should have rode with your parents. You know, and what I've been trying to convey to the Democrats, and I went to over 20 states last year campaigning for governors, Senate, House, and so forth. And what I try to convey is we need someone running who's going to offer practical, realistic solutions. I've come down hard on some of the Democrats in the sense we're making a lot, they're not really false promises, but they're unrealistic in them being able to become law and be accomplished. I think you need to spend your time on the things that we can actually get done. I use Virginia as a roadmap. When I became governor, we were a red state. When I left, we were a blue state. I inherited one of the largest deficits in the history of the state when I took office, and we left one of the biggest surpluses when we left office. A record amount of jobs, economic development, working with my great Secretary of Education, Ann Holton, who is here in the crowd with us here today. I lost her when her husband ran for VP. But, you know, Ann and I, honestly, we both realized, I mean, very proud of what we did in Virginia. In order to grow your economy, folks, you have to invest in education. It is the key to everything. And in tough economic times, we put together a package for $1 billion. We redesigned all of our schools for the parents here. We got rid of 5 SOLs. We had way too many tests in Virginia. Teachers were teaching the tests. Kids were learning to memorize. We now have cognitive thought process, critical reasoning, core curriculum. We teach the concepts of cybersecurity beginning in kindergarten now in Virginia. We're the only state in America to do that. So what we did in Virginia, I think we now have the jewel of the country on education. Thousands and thousands of children we got in pre-K who had not been in it before. And I think the model we had in Virginia worked. Record economic job growth, record amount of investment, but also, and I consider myself a fiscally conservative, pro-business Democrat, socially very progressive. If I ran, Joe Biden said this the other night for himself, I would view myself as having more progressive credentials than anyone on the stage in the sense that I've actually done it. We reformed our criminal justice. We reformed our juvenile detention facilities, reduced the population by 2/3. You all know I restored more felon rights than any governor in the history of the United States of America. I got sued by the Republicans, sued twice. I kept my women's clinics open, which the Republicans all wanted to shut down. I had the record amount of vetoes. I had 120 vetoes, the most of any governor in Virginia history. Horrible stuff, anti-women, anti-LGBT, horrible. You can carry loaded shotguns in your car. I had to veto that bill. You could bring firearms into emergency shelters. That bill passed, came to my desk. But my point is, when we left office with a great cabinet, Ann and everybody else, we were an open, welcoming state. And our economy was booming. There's no question we were going to win Amazon. Look at our education system. We had it. And that's what I want for the Democratic nominee. Let's talk about practical, realistic things that we can actually do and actually get that done. But without jobs, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to shock anybody in this room. I am a capitalist. I don't want to shock anybody. I am a kid who started his first business at 14 years old because I had to if I was going to go to college. And I started dozens of companies. Some worked, some had trouble. I'm an entrepreneur. I've seen ups and downs. That's what you want. But without economic growth, I consider, as someone said the other day, well, Terry's a compassionate capitalist. We got to fix the tax code. We got to fix the income inequality. But goodness gracious, folks, you go out there and work hard. We give you a good education. That's what America is founded on. And we just got to build upon that.
So let me try one more time here. So how dependent, though, is you talked about a minute ago about having a lane for you. How dependent is your decision on whether or not Joe Biden runs?
Yeah,
if he runs, does that mean you don't, or is that necessarily so?
It's a good question. I mean, he's in the same lane. I mean, he and I are very similar lanes. He has tremendous more name identification than I do. I'll be very honest with you. But I'm always someone, let's go for it. What the heck? I mean, it's a factor in my decision. Governors don't have high name ID in America. Senators do. You have a Kavanaugh hearing or whatever, and tens of millions of people watch it. We don't have that same type of thing. And you just want to make sure, Julie, the point is when you get in and you put everybody through this process and you put your family through it, you just want to be able to make sure that your voice and your message is going to be heard. That is a very important point. You could get in, but if you don't get any oxygen for your message, it makes it hard.
Mm-hmm. What's the vote at home right now? That's the other important question.
Vote at home?
Vote at home with 5 kids.
They're good. Dorothy, she'd be a great first lady. She's spectacular. Listen, I'll be honest with you, for a couple of my children, it's probably not their ideal thing that they want their dad to do. I mean, I'm not, I always tell the story that, my youngest, I still have a 16-year-old. When we were in Richmond when I was governor, state police drive you to school. And Peter would go in the state police car and they would drop him, he'd make him drop him off a block away from school because he didn't like any of that kind of stuff. And now my daughter Sally, who was a couple of years older, she'd go and she'd say, put the siren lights on. Totally different. She'd like to be the campaign manager. But, and you wouldn't do it if your family doesn't want you to do it. This is a hard undertaking. But I think Peter, he said to me recently, he said, Dad, I don't want all that Secret Service stuff. I said, well, there's a long way to go till you got to worry about that. Don't worry about that.
A lot of
but the family will be okay.
I don't know if you heard this the other day, but former House Majority Leader Eric Cantor said that Joe Biden is, quote, way too reasonable for the Democratic base. Now, he'd likely say the same thing about you. Yeah. Yeah. In what ways, though, do you worry that the Democratic Party may be lurching or may have lurched too far to the left?
I think who we nominate, what the message is, I think it's going to be very important. We have this debate going on in the country today. We've got these new members of Congress. We've got AOC. I think she's terrific. I mean, I may not agree with everything she said. I think it's great. I just think it's terrific that we have all these people with new, different ideas. That's a good thing. And I may have a difference of opinion on different issues, not saying I'm right, but so, I love a big crowd and running with a lot of different ideas. What is important to me, Julie, is that we don't get into a place for the general election where our nominee, people put the nominee, and you already see what Trump's trying to do. He's trying to label us all as socialists. You've seen sort of what he's trying to do. That we get put in a box that people don't think the Democrats are the ones that are going to get the economy roaring, help everybody, uplift everybody, invest in education. I mean, that's the core things that we need to do. And we'll see what happens, but there's there's a lot of folks running. I can't tell you today what's going to happen.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Green New Deal. That seems to be the latest buzz phrase among Democrats. So should a Green New Deal be at the top of the 2020 platform?
So I would put climate change, no question, Julie, at the
You're gonna
top.
call it something else.
There's
Yeah,
no
call it-
question. And I can tell you this, folks, from personal experience. As Ann knows, we have many a cabinet meeting. You go to Norfolk, Virginia on a day it may have rained 2 or 3 hours. Literally, you could see half of the streets are closed. We're the second most vulnerable region in America. Louisiana is 1, Hampton Roads, Virginia is number 2. This climate change is real. I've been saying this for a long time. It's happening. We got to get serious about it. It's an absolute disgrace that the President of the United States took us out of the Paris Agreement. It's just unbelievable. Now, what happened is, first time you've really seen this, if you go back and read the Federalist Papers, but the states said, forget what the President of the United States did. We sent a message around the globe. Forget what he said. A bunch of us Democratic governors, we got together and said, no, we're going to do it on our own. And collectively, what the Democratic governors did was bigger than any country in the world, so we sent a strong signal. I used executive authority. There's no way I could have got it done legislatively. But I did executive authority to put Virginia in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the only southern state to do it. But we invested a lot on renewable energy. We made tremendous progress in Virginia, but we got a long way to go. So the Green New Deal, and remember, it's a non-binding resolution and very aspirational, but I love aspirational goals. But there are many parts that I want to work on, but we got to get real. It is if not the single biggest issue facing our country today and the globe today. The extreme weather patterns we had, I dealt with this with the storms as governor that I had to deal with. It is so serious, and we've got to get serious about it. And the next president will come in, get us back into the Paris Agreement, and America needs to be back a leader on climate change.
Mm-hmm. Last week, Speaker Pelosi took some heat from the left and brought some relief to moderate Democrats when she said President Trump, quote, wasn't worth impeaching. What is your view on that issue?
Well, I think the Constitution should dictate whether the president should be impeached. If there are high crimes and misdemeanors and we get to a point, I clearly understand what the Speaker was doing, saying, you know, if we can't get any Republicans in the Senate to do this, then we're going to go through this whole process and we're going to tie up all the things, infrastructure we're trying to get done. But if you know Nancy very well, and I do know her, I've known her for a very long time. I've known her since 1979. She's one of the people I've known the longest in politics. We've been great friends. I think it was very smart what she was trying to say out there, and she was putting a marker out there. But if Mueller comes back and things come up that you've got serious violations of federal law, then she'll do impeachment. But let's not spend all our time on this until we have the facts before us. Folks, we got to deal with infrastructure. We need an infrastructure bill. I mean, our roads are crumbling. All of you who are out on the roads today, our bridges are in tough shape. You worry about going on some of our bridges, our trains. I mean, it's a joke in this country. I mean, you go to Europe or you go to Asia, you get on a train, let it be a maglev, or you get over to the trains that you have, the TGV in France. I mean, we got to get like that here in this country. Because, and as governor, I did about $10 billion of transportation projects. I'm very proud. I reformed our whole transportation system because, as you know, when I came in office, I inherited a couple horrible projects. A Route 460, where we'd spent $300 million on a road, not a shovel went in the ground, never even applied for a permit to go over 400 acres of wetlands. Now, they'd never permitted 400 acres of wetlands, the Army Corps of Engineers. But let's assume they were gonna. You at least got to file the permit. So we fixed all that. There are no more political roads. All you Virginia residents should know that not a road in Virginia gets built today at the state level that doesn't go through a scoring metric system. And I don't care who sponsors, there's no more political roads. As governor, I could have called my secretary, Aubrey Lane, said, I want this taken care of. Couldn't do it by law, which is a good thing. But folks, we got to get serious about this in this country. We are so far behind. And that's, you know, if I were elected president, one of the first things I would do is an infrastructure bill. I would do a lifetime workforce retraining would be another big issue, people in the workforce to get them reskilled so that we can continue to grow up and get more income. I mean, there's some basic things that we need to do that have just been, the politics today in this country are just horrible. I blame a lot of it on racial gerrymandering, on the gerrymandered districts. I happen to support independent, nonpartisan commissions to draw all 50 states. What happens is you can't lose your general election because they draw the lines for incumbent protection. So the only way you lose is in a primary in your own party. I fought like a dog, as Ann will tell you, for Medicaid expansion. I lived, breathed, slept it. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To me, it was 400,000 people getting access to health care. And I knew as governor that we paid for them to get health care, but that woman may not have gotten that mammogram screening, and she died. It bothered me, as Ann knows, every single day. And the idea, and the way I'd structured it, to get a hospital provider tax, the state would not put up a penny. It wouldn't cost the state a penny, not a penny, and we'd bring $2.2 billion back in a year, provide 400,000 people with health care, 35,000 jobs created, save rural hospitals, but my Republican legislature would not even have a committee hearing to even hear it for 4 straight years. The speaker told me on my inauguration day, you will never get it as long as I'm speaker. And you know what? And I used to have Republican legislators come over to the mansion and have a beer with me and say, Governor, I'd vote for it tomorrow. Because they were from rural communities. You had the opiate crisis, you had a mental health crisis. But if I do, I'll lose my Tea Party primary. And they were not willing to risk a job that paid $17,000 a year to get health care for 400,000 people. Folks, that's what's wrong with politics in this country today.
So I've got lots of questions, but we're going to give you guys a chance tonight, too. So I just want to remind you, there's some index cards out there, and if anybody has questions, we'll be collecting at about 7:45 and 8, and we're going to cycle some of those through a little later, too. So think about that as well. So since you won't break big news tonight about a 2020 run, I do want you to tell us about your new book.
Well, here's what I'll do. If you get Dwight Schar, who we're named after here, who is the RNC finance chair and George Bush's finance chair, to come on stage right now, endorse me and say this. I'm only teasing.
I don't have that kind of power. But let's talk about.
I'm only teasing.
Let's talk about your book. Coming out in July. You can already pre-order it out there on Amazon.
Yeah, I hope you get it. Beyond Charlottesville.
Beyond Charlottesville, taking a stand against white nationalism. And I want to just note, too, presidential candidates often put books out before they run. But that's just an aside. You begin the book with something that's going to be pretty compelling for the readers, with a conversation with President Trump on the day of the tragedy in Charlottesville. Tell us about that conversation.
So the books, I've got the manuscript done. We're going back, we're editing. It'll be out probably in the 3rd week of July as a run-up to the 2nd anniversary of Charlottesville, which was August 12th, as you know, August 17th. Probably my toughest day as governor. I had a lot of tough days, but, I loved being governor. But this was really a hard day. We had 1,000 people come in from 35 states screaming the worst things you've ever heard about members of the African-American community, screaming the worst things I've ever heard about members of the Jewish faith. About 1,000 of them, wearing their, have their swastikas on and all the stuff they had. But I thought it was important that we had a book to actually explain how it happened. How did we get here in America, where people, they used to wear hoods in this country to espouse their hatred and their racism because they didn't want anyone to see who they were. But somehow, Julie, we got to a place in America that they don't think they have to wear hoods anymore, and they don't have to do it at night. And I'd never seen anything like it. So I wrote this book, and I think you'll find it fascinating. I talk about all the lead up to it and what we knew was happening and how it was happening. But I started the book out with my phone call with the president. He called about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I explained to the president what's happening on the ground in Charlottesville, explained him very specifically the things they were saying. And I've said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I said, Mr. President, this is a big opportunity for you. This is important. America needs, at a time of crisis, a moral leader. Someone needs to step up and say the right thing. I said, President Clinton, he had to do it during Oklahoma City. President Bush had to do it through 9/11. And then, of course, President Obama had to do Charleston. He agreed with me. He said, I'm going to go out and do my press conference right away. I said, I'm going to wait on my press conference, Mr. President. You are the president. You go first, and I'll go after you. He said, yeah, I'll go right away, and then you can go after me. Half an hour went by, an hour went by, an hour and a half went by. Very strange. I think in my mind what actually was happening is let it be Bannon or Miller, I don't know who, some ideologue in the White House got in touch with him and said, no, 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 you cannot come out and attack neo-Nazis and white supremacists. In fact, nobody would even use the words. He wouldn't use the words. And he came out, as you know, and wouldn't use the words. And he came out and said that it was both sides. And it really wasn't both sides. This was, to me, one of the largest moral failures of any president in the history of our country. This is a time people were looking for leadership, and he just failed. And I find it hard to explain. And then, of course, as you know, I had to go out, and it was really hard for me, obviously for a lot of reasons. But just before I went out to speak, I had found that the state police helicopter had crashed with my pilot and a member who had been a member of my executive protection unit. These people who provide protection for the governor's family are, as Ann knows, they're like your family. They're with you. And Burke had really been in charge of my children. I mean, it was like losing, to me, like losing a son. And Jay, who had been my pilot, and literally just before I walked out to give my remarks, I was briefed that the helicopter had crashed and they both had been killed. I couldn't say anything about it because the families had not been notified. But I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about Virginia. This is, you know, how did people view Virginia in the world? I was getting calls from all over the world. And I went out, and as y'all know, I called them out, neo-Nazis, white supremacists. I said, get the hell out of Virginia, get the hell out of America. You know, I said, you parade around like you're a bunch of patriots. You're not patriots, you're a bunch of cowards. And I gave the speech, unfortunately, that the President of the United States should have given. And it was sad. It's really hard to explain. But, you know, I go through all of that in it, the Friday, the Saturday, what happened on Friday night at UVA, and then Sunday, and then the funerals. But I try to end, Julie, on where do we go from here? You know, how do people get to this place where they think like this and act like this? And you know, a lot goes what happens at home, and we've got to do a better job at education earlier on to understand diversity and inclusion. And, you know, I deal with all those issues. So it'll be a powerful statement, but it needs to be said.
So we all know that the shooter in the mosque massacre in New Zealand called President Trump a symbol of renewed white identity. He also went on to say that he didn't think that the president's policies really helped white supremacists. But we know the president condemned the attack, but he also said he does not think white nationalism is on the rise in this country. What's your assessment of that and the fact that he—
It's disgraceful. And listen, I do not blame the President of the United States for specific acts. I do blame the President of the United States for the tenor and the demeanor and the language that he uses for people to think that they can act this way. And he condones it. And it's the things he says, but it's also when he came in those 7 nations. Remember when he came in on the immigrant ban in those 7 nations? Folks, I remember like yesterday. I remember I was at the governor's mansion, and I got a call about 11 o'clock in the morning. I got tipped off that a family had left one of those 7 countries, had landed at Dulles Airport, and was being detained. Kids were U.S. citizens, being detained without access to legal counsel. I didn't believe the phone call. This is the United States of America. So I called my Attorney General, Mark Herring. I said, get up to Dulles. We're doing a press conference at 2 o'clock. And I went up. Still, these people were being detained for hours on end in a room without access. U.S. citizens. They didn't do anything wrong. They had just gotten on a plane from one of those 7 countries. And I said, I'm the governor. This is my state. This airport's in my— I said, I'm not leaving until these people get released or access to legal counsel. They finally got them legal counsel. I mean, you got to remember what he did. And then the whole issue, Julie, of him rounding up people and deporting them from the country. You know, let it be 13.5 or 16, whatever number you want to use of the illegal immigrants in this country today. The policy is you stay here unless you commit a serious criminal offense. But what was happening, we had a church where folks who'd spent the night, which you want them to do, you don't want them on the streets, walked out, and then, of course, INS, and you remember it, and they put them all up against a wall. It was your story. Mm-hmm. You remember it very well. Yeah. For no reason, no probable cause. And I can just tell you this, it was crippling to us in Virginia, to our economy in Northern Virginia. 60% of the small businesses in Northern Virginia, foreign-born ownership. And I went to visit some of these small mom and pop grocery stores and dry cleaners. Everybody was terrified. So I called Secretary Kelly, who was then the head of DHS, and I said, I need to have a meeting. I'm now chairman of the National Governors Association, so I'm representing all the governors. I said, we need to know what the heck's going on here, the governors. What, you're rounding up all these people. So I sat with the secretary, and he told me the policy is nobody gets deported unless they've committed a serious criminal offense, which, you know, most Americans would agree with that. You come here, you commit, you're going to be deported. And I said, that's the policy. Yep. That night, they had the governors for dinner at the White House, and as chairman, I sat next to the president, and I explained the whole conversation with him. And I said, Mr. President, is this your policy? Yes, it is. Great. A week later, y'all probably remember, it was a big Washington Post story. A woman was stopped for a broken taillight, and INS got a hold of her. So as governor, I pardoned her. I got rid of the underlying crime, so therefore, there was no crime to deport her. Didn't stop INS. And if you remember, it was a famous photo with the two little kids hanging on to the white van as it pulled away with the mother. So they deported the mother and left the husband and the two children here. So, Julie, it's everything that he does, this constant attack, the wall, all the things that he does. He's created this environment in this country. He has created hatred. He's got people fighting against one another, and we got to change him.
I want to come back to your book for a minute. What distinction, if any, do you draw between white nationalism and white supremacy? Or is it blurring to you now?
They're in the same pot to me, because they were there together in, you know, saying the same thing, exchanging the same slogans. They were all in it together. You know, I think for a lot of them, you know, suppose he was here because the Robert E. Lee statue was voted to be taken down in Charlottesville. I bet you half these folks didn't even know who the heck Robert E. Lee was. This was an opportunity to come to spew hatred. And this is what I'm telling you that Trump unleashed. It was an opportunity to come and spew hatred. And I went to such great lengths to try and, I would tell the counter protesters, try not to go out tomorrow. I mean, it's hard not to do it. I had very quietly ordered the National Guard out. First time a governor in a domestic situation had ordered the National Guard in 48 years. But I wanted them there. But I didn't want anyone to know we were deploying them because, you know, if they heard the governor's declared national, he's deploying the Guard, everybody we got in every car in every state in America said, man, I got to be there. This is it. So we tried to keep it very, very quiet. And I tell a story in my book. Laura Vizella, who's a Washington Post reporter, someone tipped her off and said there's all these caravan of trucks headed to Charlottesville. So she, of course, called my press secretary, said the governor declared a state of emergency. Why are all these? Luckily, that weekend we'd had training exercises. So we were able, I'm sorry, Julie, we were able to tell the press the truth, but it was squishy truth, to be honest with you.
Training in Charlottesville.
That we were deploying, but, you know, he just wanted to be careful. But it was a sad, and I've spent a lot of time with Susan Bro, who's Heather Heyer's mother, and she's in the book a lot. John Lewis actually writes the foreword for me in the book. Actually, I'm donating all the proceeds will go to Heather's foundation and the State Police Foundation for the two folks. So, you know, but it needs to be told.
You know, discussions and debate about reparations, about that whole notion, that's also started to intensify some lately. I mean, what's your thought about reparations and, you know, whether that may be an essential step to racial healing in this country, or is it just impractical and impossible to do?
Yeah, I think if we want to be serious about this, and I do, my last chapter is all about this, you know, everybody talks about these reconciliation commissions. Forget all that. That's a bunch of white people sitting around making themselves feel good. Forget it. Do something. I'm sorry. Do something. Lean in on schools, like Ann and I did in Petersburg and Richmond and Norfolk. You know, more money for pre-K. We have schools in Virginia today, as much as we tried, but we still got schools where there's holes in the walls and, you know, they're just not facilities that children should be learning education. We got to fix the school. I go back forget everything. This has all got to be dealt with at home first. Parents have a real responsibility to make sure they teach these issues to their children. But the schools also, our responsibility at the state level is we got to provide a quality education for everyone. And every child, no matter your zip code, no matter where you're from, you ought to be able to get a great teacher and a great education. If you have an inferior school with inferior teachers, these students are already behind the 8 ball and their likelihood of success is going to be highly diminished. That's just plain not fair. So what I would argue is not reparations. We got a serious issue confronting us in front of us. Let's do what we have to do on these issues of health care. The other thing we got to work on is sentencing reform in this country. I'm very proud I had the most pardons too, no surprise, vetoes, pardons, and restoration of rights. But, oh, folks, I mean, I remember going out the door, I pardoned one individual. You're just not going to believe it. 5 thefts, total $515. Was high on meth the whole time, but stole about $515, $520. No one ever injured, okay? No one ever injured. 2 life sentences plus 150 years. How do you like that? The disparity and disproportionate sentencing in this country is a damn disgrace. And that's something we need actually to deal with. Healthcare, another big issue. Everybody ought to get quality access to quality healthcare. That's why I was so wild about Medicaid expansion in the Commonwealth. But that's what we should be focusing on.
So some of your fellow Democrats in Virginia have had to cede some of their moral high ground after the disclosures that Governor Northam and Attorney General Mark Herring appeared in blackface as young men. Before we talk about the political fallout, and I do want to talk about that, in early February, you called for the governor to, as you put it, do the right thing and step down. He didn't heed your call and that of many others. He's still governing, albeit in a really low-profile way right now. What is your view, as we sit here tonight, about whether he's going to be able to overcome this and effectively govern? Well,
he's decided not to leave, so he's staying, so we've got to overcome it. That's the simple answer. We've got to move on. But listen, the Friday night, Ralph and I are very close. I went and picked him to be my lieutenant governor, and obviously we're very close. What was very hard for me on that Friday night is when he came out and did the video and said he was in the picture, and he didn't know which one he was. I'll be honest with you, I personally had a real problem because that meant either you were blackface or you put on a Ku Klux Klan outfit. And I got to tell you, folks, that's a bridge too far. It was too much for me. And it was in his yearbook page. It was the next day he came out and said he wasn't in the picture and he didn't know it was on his yearbook. I wish he'd said that Friday. But on Friday night and Saturday. So the point is he is not leaving. And so that's it. Let's get together. And he needs to lean in and do a lot of things I just talked to you about. Finish up a lot of the great things we started on education. But boy, we ought to put a lot of money into making sure that every school, the infrastructure of every school is up to snuff, that's state of the art. And that's what he needs to focus on. And as I say, I'm not into all people sitting around these commissions. It's just not my personality. Do something.
You're traveling around the country a fair amount. What kind of a stain, though, does this put on Virginia outside looking in? What are you hearing from people?
Well, for a while there, it was bad for 4 to 6 weeks. I got asked wherever I went. The idea that our governor, our lieutenant governor, our attorney general, all in a matter of a week, all had some type of issue. It was heartbreaking for me. We'd worked hard, as I say, to make sure Virginia was open and welcoming. And, I had to veto the bill where, a baker could deny a gay couple a cake. I had to do a lot of stuff and to make sure that, you want Google, Facebook, Microsoft, you got to be open and welcoming. And when I see this type of stuff, it breaks my heart. But we'll get over it. We're a great state. We do have issues. I used executive authority. I took the Confederate flag off the license plate. It's a divisive symbol. It is what it is. And so I had that same group protest me at the mansion, but that's okay. We had, I can't think the exact numbers, but we have like 368 Confederate statues in Virginia. We have like 2 to the Revolutionary War, which, was basically all in Virginia, Battle of Yorktown and George Washington, and the whole history. And starting with our first governor, give me liberty, give me death. I think we have 2. I think we have 1 to World War II, maybe 2 to World War II. It's just unbelievable. And 368 or 378, and many of them were done in the 1950s. It wasn't done around the Civil War, so it was during massive resistance. And there's places that these statues can be, museum or cemeteries. Take them down. They're just an offensive symbol. And everybody worries about, what are we going to do about the cost? And, at the end of the day, you got to do the right thing. Bite the bullet and just do it. They are offensive symbols. They are a symbol of slavery to the African American community, and no state should have them. Plain and simple, and you can put them and do what you want with them.
So before all 3 top Democrats were caught up in controversy, Democrats were pretty confident that they would win control of the General Assembly in November. How likely do you think that is now?
Yeah, I think likely, but let me also be very clear. We had some issues, obviously, but we just had the candidate, Corey Stewart, who ran against Tim Kaine, wrapped himself in the Confederate flag running for a Senate race. If Traveler, Robert E. Lee's horse was still alive, he'd be riding around the state on Traveler. Really? And then you had the candidate for governor against Ralph Ed Gillespie, who I said ran a racist campaign, MS-13. So in fairness and all perspective, it was wrong, it's never right. Blackface is never right, ever. But let's keep this in perspective that,
So how do these candidates in all these House and Senate races get past it? And will they get past it?
Number one, you've got to, most importantly, I think every candidate ought to say, here is what we're going to do. If I get elected, here's what we're going to do. And go back to the things I talked about on schools and healthcare, deal with the issues of unfair sentencing we have. Talk about resolve. We know the problem. We got to move past it. Voters want to know what you're going to do for them. And I think we're going to win both. We've great candidates. I just did a big event the other night with all the candidates in Northern Virginia. I think I've agreed to 10 events already that I'm doing. This is important to me. We work so hard, and I think we're going to get them both. And I get so excited. Do you think, the Democrats could have both chambers with a Democratic governor? Think of the things we could get done. I go to bed at night looking up, and boy, for a brief time, I wish I was governor again. If I had, let's be honest. When I took office, I had 32 Democrats out of 100, and those folks weren't getting out of bed every day. The Republicans, the group of them, saying I want to help Terry McAuliffe be successful, but we ended up getting 70% of my governor's bills passed and so forth. But oh my goodness, the exciting, number one, right out of the box, boom, background checks day one. Everyone who buys a firearm in Virginia should go through a background check. We should get rid of assault weapons. We can get rid of bump stocks, get rid of the gun show loophole. You can do that right. Boy, don't get me excited.
So that's a segue to what I was going to ask you. Now, it does seem, again, watching your social media feed, that you've been at quite a few events lately with Virginia Democratic candidates and kind of playing the role that Ralph Northam would normally be taking if he weren't laying low like he is right now. So if you don't run for president, how do you see your role in the fall campaigns in trying to win that Democratic majority?
If I didn't run, I would... If I decided not to run, I would probably help Vice President Biden, but I would use every waking moment to help Virginia win the House and the Senate. As governor, I lived through all these issues, and I know them inside and out, and I just know what is, for all of you Virginia voters here, the potential of what we could get done, the things that were blocked. I tried for years. It's a felony in Virginia if you steal anything $200. So if you go out and steal groceries for $200.50, you're a felon in Virginia. Actually had to pardon a woman who stole about $225 on a Christmas day. She stole some food and clothing at the grocery store. It was wrong. Gave her a sentence, made her a felon, put her away, and took her kids away and put them in social services. Really? So we got it this year up to 500, but it should be 1,000. We're like 30 other states in the country. I'm just saying there's so many things that we need to fix in the Commonwealth of Virginia to take it to the next level.
So we know in Virginia, governors rather can't serve consecutive terms.
Yeah.
But they can serve again. You said being governor is the best job you ever had. Would you consider running again? I can hear the slogan, "Bring back Mac." I hear it.
I hadn't heard that, but I don't know if you did see it. There's, John Fredericks, the radio host? I don't know if John Fredericks is a very conservative radio host down in, I think, Virginia Beach. He is one of Trump's best friends. He has bought this gigantic billboard as big as this, with a big picture of me in the mansion holding up a beer, which, I have to sell my products. And it says, "Miss me yet?" And it's on Richmond, on the highways down there. But, listen, I love being governor. We had a great time, smashed a lot of records. I think it's hard to go back and beat your own record. I loved it. I mean, what I do, I do. I was 24/7. Y'all know I installed a kegerator in the governor's mansion, and we'd serve our craft beer. I loved it. I built a cigar garden out back, negotiate all our business deals till 3 in the morning. I didn't sleep. I loved it. And burned out most of my executive protection unit. They made a lot of overtime. You never say never. It's not something, I'm really going through this process right now in my mind, whether I'm running for president or not.
Yeah.
And I just really haven't thought. But even if I did run for president, Julie, I would do a lot to help our candidates in Virginia. This is so important. We win a majority of the vote, Democrats do. You look at, we got all the 3 statewide. But when I got elected governor, folks, we had 8 Republicans and 3 Democrats in our congressional delegation, all because of gerrymandered districts. Now we've made great progress. We've got, we got all the great Elaine Luria and Spanberger and Jennifer Wexton. We had 3 great women come in, and then of course Don McEachin. So we've changed the numbers, but that's going to be a big piece of the next legislative agendas and the governor in 2021, and how we deal with these maps, which I think is very important. But I never say no to anything in life. I'll be honest with you. I'd like to be Tom Brady's backup quarterback. For a day, I'd like to be Pope, fix all that stuff. The heck. They could are you telling me they couldn't use a kegerator over in the Vatican? Honestly.
I am going to return to the serious issues at Richmond for a minute, though. You also called on Virginia's Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax to resign after a second woman came forward with sexual assault allegations. Again, he's refused, denied the allegations. Many leaders in the African American community, the NAACP in particular, were outraged that so many elected Democrats called for his ouster without due process or any finding of fact. Do you think you spoke too soon about him? Well,
I think you'd have a very hard time calling for the governor to leave and the lieutenant governor. Both of these women came up with they are very credible. And when the first woman came out in detail with her story, and then the second woman came out in detail with her story, I just think it's very hard as a statewide elected official. You always have to govern up here with the moral authority behind you of all the things you try and get done. And this is painful. For anyone to have to call for someone's resignation, but, I believe both of those women, and I think it's untenable. And now the investigation, I think in Suffolk there's an investigation going on. I think Duke University is doing something. Maybe the House, I don't like this idea
and that's my next question. There is unfinished business in Richmond. The House Republicans say they want to hold a hearing to call in both women and the lieutenant governor to testify. Right approach or wrong?
Yeah, I don't like that. From what I read, though, is the Democrats weren't consulting on it at all. They were told after the fact that we're doing this. That's not how it should be done. It should be done in a bipartisan way. And I do believe the first woman doesn't feel comfortable coming into a partisan hearing.
Right.
And if you're serious about it and you wanted to have a serious hearing, which I think Justin has asked for, then you ought to get both sides together and figure out how you should do this. But they tried to ram that around the Democrats' throat, and that's just not right. I don't like that.
So let's talk about Amazon. Over the weekend, Arlington County Board took their vote and approved the $23 million performance agreement with Amazon. But there are a lot of big worries that remain about affordable housing, about whether Amazon's presence is going to displace and drive out a lot of lower income residents, many of them immigrants. I mean, you were one of the architects of the package that was presented. What do you say now to those fears and sort of this possible darker side to Amazon?
Yeah, and listen, I wrote the bid. I submitted the bid while I was governor in October of 17. We spent a lot of time on this. I think it's a very good bid. This would be a generational change for Virginia. It's 25,000, $150,000 a year jobs. There's a second tranche of 12.5, which we're going to get. So we're really talking 37,500 jobs. 150,000 jobs. This will be generational changes for families, not only in Northern Virginia, but it will have ripple effects throughout the state. I worked very hard for 4 years. I traveled. I was the most traveled governor in America. I went to 35 trade missions. We made Virginia the #1 state for cybersecurity of all 50 states, #1 state for data analytics, #1 state for unmanned systems. For me, getting Amazon was the final piece of what I call building the new Virginia economy. We are now the Silicon Valley of the East Coast. We really are. It's not just, I always have my good phrases and I'm the ultimate optimist, but this really puts us in a place that no other state can compete against. So in addition, as you know, we had millions of square feet vacant because of sequestration. The problem when I took office was that we'd gotten hit by sequestration. Virginia is the #1 recipient of Department of Defense dollars. #1, we have 27 military installations. We have the largest naval base in the world, the Pentagon, Quantico, the CIA, all in Virginia. So when they cut defense, really has a ripple. We had to diversify our economy. Unemployment, as you know, went all the way from 5.4 to 3.6 under our term. Personal income went up, Julie, 12.5%. That's what I'm very proud of. When you talk jobs, they got to be good jobs. So, and we've got to deal, the issue of affordable housing, not just related to Amazon, we have had that problem in this region for a long time. People have to drive so far now to get to their work, and that's why we've invested in Metro and done the things we need to do. But we do need to, and I agree, we do need to do a lot more in this area on affordable housing. The cities, the counties, and the states have to do a better job because it's just too crippling for individuals. And the other thing, folks, our minimum wage in Virginia, do you know this, is $7.25. How can you live on $7.25? Now, Maryland, you saw they just voted, they're going to $15. It's what Virginia should do, and it's scaled going up. You can't live on $7.25. And for many people, how do they even get to work? So they can't afford the housing, transportation cost, and they're making $7.25. So that's the next thing. That's why I'm just saying the next governor with a Democratic legislature, we can fix a lot of these things, but we have to. There is an issue in this country today of income inequality. The top are doing great, but folks here, they've gone backwards. They don't feel like they're going, and their kids don't feel like they're going forward. And that's the exciting, that's the next big challenge, not only in Virginia, but nationally. But Amazon will help solve that. I'm very proud of the work we did on education. Our workforce, we're the first state to have a workforce performance development grant, where if you go get one of our credentials, we had 166 credentials. We met with the business community. What do you need? Okay, then we matched it here. You go get one of our credentials, the state will pay 2/3 of the cost. That's the way we need to do it. One of the best events I had before I left office, we were down at Fort Pickett, and we had, I guess it was about 19 young kids, 17, 18 years old, 19 years old. None of them have any intention of going to, they're from Southside Virginia, had any intention to go into college or community college. They didn't want to do it. So they went and got our credential. I'm working on power lines. So I think it was like an 12-week course. We paid 2/3 of the cost. So I went for the graduation. I gave them their certificate. I think these 19 kids walked across the stage. I gave everyone a certificate. Every kid walked off the stage, had a job, starting pay $72,000 a year in Wakefield, Virginia. That's life-changing. That's what we've got to start doing, is matching all the jobs and getting skills and putting that piece together. We can do this. Cybersecurity, you all heard me talk. You were running from me because I kept talking about this. We had 48,000 open jobs when I left office in cybersecurity, starting pay $88,000. You don't need a 4-year degree. You don't even need a 2-year degree. And GMU and JMU and a lot of the schools and really did a whole program on cybersecurity here. 48,000 open jobs at $88,000. I hate doing all these faculty members here. Jeez. And I take a cyber job.
You know,
But we'll pay 2/3 of you if you want to get a little cyber job.
so New York, Amazon in New York. What's
Tragedy.
what's the takeaway from that? What's
Disgraceful.
instructive about that?
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, this would be generational change from New York as well, because they have finance jobs, very high-paying jobs here. They got a lot of real estate, wealthy foreign investors come in on the real estate, but they need, just like we need, to fill this band here. They needed it like oxygen in New York, and they could not have screwed it up any worse. They talked about $3 billion of the money, acted like they were giving them $3 billion up front. That's not the case. 90% of the money, about $2.7 billion of the $3 billion, there's two funds in New York, the Excelsior Fund, which is the state fund, and then the city. It didn't matter for Amazon. It could be the Julie Carey company. If they had gone in and offered those number of jobs, you would have gotten the same amount of money. This was not a bid that Amazon got a sweet deal on. Anyone who comes in with the required jobs, pays the revenue, you're guaranteed of getting it. So for Amazon, and then over 20 years, they would have netted $27.3 billion. And you would have built this entire infrastructure like we're going to do in Virginia. I mean, we're the envy of the country today because we're going to have it. And what happened, Julie, is people got out with false information. They basically convinced people that they were handing them a pile of $3 billion of cash. And remember, our bid here in Virginia is they don't get a penny. In fact, there's like a 3-year trigger on it. They don't get a penny until we get our money in first. I mean, there's no risk for us in Virginia. But basically, New York was very similar. Their just numbers were much higher. And those people should be thrown out of office. I think it's a disgrace to lose this kind of economic activity for young people who are looking for work. It's just, it baffles me. Now, it guaranteed we'll get the other 12.5, and Nashville will now get more jobs. They're not going to do another H2Q. Right. They're done. Right. And I just think, and now, you know, the mayor and others are trashing Amazon. That's not something I would do, because, I always tell my kids, always, I got 5 of them, always be nice to everybody. Always be nice. You don't know. That person could be sheriff in the town where your kid gets picked up for drunk driving or something, 20 years, you don't know. Love everybody. And that's how I feel about life, and that's how I feel about Amazon.
So on WTOP, we always got a lot of mileage out of transportation.
What's that?
I said we got a lot of mileage out of transportation conversation on WTOP. So, you obviously a
Which,
huge...
let me give Julie a good shout out, because she's right, though. I did TOP, and she's a great questioner. She always comes prepared, but she does understand the transportation issues. And you did know how, to Northern Virginia, when I did the 10 lanes on 66, it was controversial, but you were there always, you understood it. To all you folks, I just want you to understand here, if you're a single driver, you are not allowed to go on 66 during HOV times. That's the law. What we did is, we'll give you an option. Single driver during HOV times, you want to pay to go on it, you can go on it. But boy, the Republicans had $48 tolls. First of all, it's called dynamic tolling. If it says $48, guess what? They're telling you not to get on the road. That's what dynamic, it changes every 3 minutes. That's how it works.
But you know what I'm aiming at, and it's exactly that. You were a big proponent of more tolling to add more lanes. But yeah, those tolls that we're seeing some mornings right now, I understand it's dynamic tolling, but did you really envision that $20, $30, $40 one-way tolls, or does something need to be adjusted
So
there?
first of all, you should understand that 66 was the most congested road in the United States of America. Under federal law, you have to keep a minimum miles per hour for federal funding. We had fallen behind that for years, and we had gotten our notice that we would lose all federal funding on 66. So we knew we had to do something. Inaction was not an option. Now, the hard part was Arlington County never wanted, how many Arlington County folks we have here? God bless you. Yeah. For years, didn't want anything done. So we went to them, and said we're going to add all the multimodal and we're going to add all the mass transit. And I want to thank Arlington County because they allowed us to do it. And you've already seen the results. I mean, you just go to the website. The speed limit is now 12 miles faster per hour than it was before we did it. So we're back in compliance with the federal government. If we lose federal funding, you can't operate the road. I mean, we don't have the money to do that. And the other thing is, so now you'll have, right now you have 3 free, right? You're going to have 3 free and then 2 inside if you choose to go on and do the express lanes. Because of that concession, we were able to bring in $3.2 billion. Not a penny of state dollars, not a nickel, is being used to build that road. It is the model for the other countries of what we did on 66. Totally paid for by outside. You got new lanes, new multimodal, tons of more transit buses, and we're adding new bike lanes. None of that would happen, so I want to thank Arlington County. And as I say, we did it at no expense. But, you know, I mean, I didn't mind taking grief. I mean, I enjoy it, sort of. And leadership's about making tough decisions. If you believe it's right, do it. That's life. What did I tell my cabinet, Ann, every Monday morning?
Fail at something and learn from it.
Try new things. Don't be afraid to fail. I'm only going to be mad at you if you don't try something new. Try it, shake it up. And state government, you know, you got to really crank those wheels sometimes. Fun.
I want to jump out to a national issue that's in the news right now, and that's, of course, President Trump's veto of the Senate bill on his national emergency declaration. Now that, you know, we'll see what happens with the courts, but what does this precedent mean if Democrats win the presidency in 2020? But really, do you
If I were president,
see that as
national
precedent?
emergency climate change, national emergency opiate addiction, national emergency guns. Man, I could get it all done in the first 100 days. Love it. Honestly.
But would you really?
I finally got Julie Carey speechless. That has never happened in years.
You obviously disagree with what the president's doing.
I think it's awful what he's doing.
Yeah.
And my ultimate thought is, and they're not going to be able to override his veto. I don't think they're going to pick enough votes. But ultimately, I think the court is not going to support him. Ultimately. But if they do, let's go.
Then Democrats run with it if they win back the presidency. Okay.
That's one reason to run for president, literally. I mean, I was aggressive as governor with executive order. I loved them. And they kept suing me.
Speaking of running for
Could
president.
you imagine as president with the authority I'd have? I could get done.
I'm going to start looking at some cards. Do you have some questions? But while I sort through them, I'm going to ask you about somebody else who's contemplating a run for president, and that is your friend across the river in Maryland, Larry Hogan.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? What do you think about?
I'm good friends with Larry. I think
there's a lane for him.
He's
I
a
suppose, on the
pro-choice
Republican side.
Republican. I think he
Yeah?
has zero chance of winning a Republican nomination. And I'm good friends and I like Larry. But I think if you are a pro-life Democrat, I'll be honest with you, it would be hard to win the Democratic nomination, just vice versa. Yeah. I just think it would be impossible for him.
That's your advice. There's a question from an audience member that kind of gets back to something that I left on the table before. This question asks, if you don't run for president, which candidate would you support and why? I've got a little bit different twist or added twist to that. Who do you like in the field right now? Who are you encouraged by?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm a very loyal Democrat too. I'm very loyal. I'm a good friend of Joe Biden's. I've known him forever. He was very good to me as governor, as I say, put billions into our port, helped us save it, campaigned vigorously for me. You know, he's the one I'm personally closest to in the race. And for me, politics is personal relationships. You know, you got to feel comfortable with people and, you know, you got to know them well. I mean, I could change, you know, and see where we are. But he's the one I've known for a long time. I've been doing this, folks, you're not going to believe this. I was Jimmy Carter's. You're going to say, you don't look, is what you should all say in unison. But I was Jimmy Carter's national finance director at the age of 23 in 1979. How do you like that? So I'm coming up on my 40th anniversary. My point being, you know, I've seen everything in this party, and I've had long, long relationships with a lot of folks. And I'm a loyal, I support my friends. So, you know, top of my head, I would support Biden, but anything can happen.
This questioner is a person after my own heart. They've got a follow-up question on their index card, and it's a good one. What, though, do you think are the biggest risks to a Biden candidacy if we're looking at
That's a good
Biden
question.
Trump?
I know as a fact, people say, his age. If you look at the polling data, that's a non-issue. 6% of Americans actually care about the age. So all of you 70, if there's anyone 70 here, you could run for president, feel no one's going to bother, no one will be bothered by it. Listen, we could be in a place where they talk about the identity politics in our party, that they think it's time for a woman to be nominated president. That could be where we are. Or time for an African American to be nominated again for president. So I think if that's where we are as a party and they talk about the identity politics, I don't think that's the case, but that's what I think probably Joe Biden's thinking about. If I get in this thing, there just may not be room here, and we may go more towards the left, and someone's going to walk away with it. That's what he's got to be concerned about.
And I think similar question that someone's asking here, in order to defeat President Trump, should Democrats pick a nominee who is a progressive or a liberal or somebody that is more moderate?
Yeah, and I hate labels when you,
Yeah.
I don't even, to me it's on the issues, you say progressive, but it's really on the issues. You get a Democrat who's going to be pro-job growth, pro-wage growth, healthcare top issue, climate change. So I think if you look at the whole basket of Democrats who are running, any one of them could beat Trump, I think, on the issues. We got to see where I'm just talking politically now, where's the economy in 2020? Most of the people who study this think we're going to have a tough hiccup in 2020 on the economy, that it's starting to go down. If that's the case, that is one thing that has sort of buoyed up President Trump, was the economy. If that's not doing well, there's no other reason to support him with all, we could spend all day on that. Every day it's some new thing. We don't know what Mueller's going to do, but, people in this country want leadership. That's what I think they want, practical, realistic solutions. What I've been trying to advocate. I don't put out things I don't think realistic. When I ran for governor, I ran on a very ambitious platform, but I believed I could always get it done. I really did. I didn't put things I never thought, Julie, I'd never have a shot. And I just think we need to be careful of that.
So is Medicare for all realistic?
The concept, everybody gets coverage. The cost of Medicare for all, very small. But I support it. Everybody in America should not have access, should have coverage. Not access, but they ought to have coverage. And it ought to be affordable and quality care. That's what we need to do. On the Green New Deal, very aspirational. Are you going to get rid of carbon in 10 years? That's not likely. But what's your plan? How are we going to invest in renewable energy? How many wind turbines are you going to build? How many solar fields? Things we did in Virginia, which I'm very proud of. And I think that's what we need to know. And we've got to do something, folks, with the tax code in this country. It's very unfair. People and big businesses are making zillions of dollars, but it's not being shared with the workers. And we ought to work hard to make it a fair tax system. So if people are doing well at the top, the people who actually work in the company share in that. And we could incentivize the tax code to do that because, as I say, I'd travel around the state and I'd meet with these SEIU workers, making $7.25. They're going to 4 or 5 homes, taking care, doing invalid care, cleaning bedpans all day, and they're making $75 and they're on 4 or 5. But that's not right. And that's what we really need to get into, and that's what people are looking for, to come up with a realistic solution to deal with these issues that affect people's lives every day. So I try to stay away from all the labels and all that, and I think that's what we need in our nominee. But you got to be able to take on Trump, let me tell you. I've known the man for 25 years. You got to be right back in his face. You got to do it with a smile. But you can't take an ounce of guff from this guy. You got to be right back on him because he loves to do his little doo-dah-day, But you got to be out there right back on him. And there was just so much material to hit him back on. You could have a field day. I go to bed dreaming that in that debate I get him so riled up, and that he comes charging over at me so damn mad, I just put him right down on the ground and boom, election's over. But you know, he's thin-skinned. He hates criticism. You know that.
Yeah.
Hates criticism.
What's he done well?
I'm not promoting violence. I'm just kidding. But
What's he done well? Where has he led well? Can you find?
yeah, no, it's a fair question. In everybody does something well, but I got to think for a second. I mean, I'm being serious. I mean, the economies, but I don't like what he did with the economy. I hate his tax cuts because it all went, to stock buybacks. It didn't help anybody. I was very vocal on this on TV. And the debt has gone up by $2 trillion, and we've got stock buybacks in companies. It hadn't helped anybody, so I don't like that. He's done a few regulatory things on things outside that don't affect it. But, I don't know, he visited our troops. I'm hard thinking about this. It's a good question. I've never been asked that before.
Get back to me. We'll move on to this question
Okay.
from one of the audience members.
Yeah, let me come back to you on that, will you?
This is a question about immigration. And the question says, immigrant workforce is important for Virginia. What does immigration guest worker policies look like in a McAuliffe administration?
Yeah, what we need to do, and this is a failure of leadership in our country, and it's a failure at the congressional level for many years. We need national immigration reform in our country. We need to pass a bill. We need to give everybody in this country a pathway to citizenship. That's what we need to. Now, of course, we need to secure the borders. But you think of how our economy is so reliant on these folks who, you just look in Virginia. Donald Trump had problem finding people who work in his vineyard down in Charlottesville. You talk to any hotel today. So we need national immigration reform. We need a very specific pathway to citizenship so that everybody who is here knows the steps they must take to be able to become a citizen of the United States of America. We got so close. Reagan almost had this done. We got so close a couple times, but with what we're dealing with today with Trump and everything, and President Obama got close, but we just couldn't get it done. It's time for national immigration reform. The key is to everybody get them out. You hate these people. People are hiding today. You all know that. They're scared to death. You want them to go get a driver's license, okay? You want them to take a driver's test. You want people on the roads. You don't want people sneaking around, hiding, scared to death. It's just not good for anybody. So that's what it would be. We'd have national immigration reform and give everybody a pathway to success and get everybody out front and say, here's who we are. And we're proud of the immigrants in this country. Unless you're Native American folks, you came here from somewhere. I'll remind you of that. Everybody came over. Bartholomew McAuliffe, 1857, came over from County Cork, Ireland. And here I am now. And glad he came over.
Be proud.
Yeah.
We've got a number of questions about the gun laws in New Zealand and how rapidly, in the wake of this tragedy, they are changing. We're hearing about getting rid of assault weapons.
Yeah.
I know gun violence prevention is near and dear to your heart. You tried a lot of things when you were governor, got just some incremental improvements there. But when we look at New Zealand and how rapidly they seem to be addressing it, do you think that further ignites things here?
It is disgraceful what's happened in this country. That we can't get anything done on, let's think about, after Newtown, Connecticut, 30 children and 3 adults killed. Nothing gets done. Then we have the issue out in Vegas on bump stocks. How hard is that to deal with bump stocks? You have Parkland, and yet nothing gets done in this country. The NRA is too powerful in the Congress. They're based in Virginia. When I ran for governor, I was proud. I was the first guy to get an F rating from them. I was damn proud of it. I ran commercials. I said, I wish there was a lower rating than F when I ran for it. Every year I put these bills in, everything I just talked about every year, and never got out of committee. And the worst thing, they've changed it, but the worst thing in Virginia when I was governor is the bills would come up at 6 or 7 in the morning, no recorded votes. No recorded votes. So you weren't even on the record if you wanted to vote something down, and it was the killing fields and all my gun bills. And they went down this year. Every one of them went down this year. I was able to get one bill done in 24 years. since Doug Wilder's one gun a month. And it was in exchange, so if you had a concealed permit, if you come into Virginia, with many states, it's automatic reciprocity. My Attorney General ended that, but it then gave me leverage to negotiate because no one has ever come into Virginia in Virginia's history with a concealed permit and hurt anybody in Virginia. What I got in exchange, the biggest threat and danger is in domestic situations at home when there's a gun present for women. So we passed a bill, it's the toughest in the United States of America. If there is a protective order given, you have 24 hours to hand your weapon in or you will be charged with a Class 6 felony. And I was impressed, Brian Moran the other day, I asked him for the numbers, and 20% of the agencies had reported, and just with that, we've had like 49 folks, felons. We have gotten confiscated 150 guns out of homes where there's a woman there and there's a protective order, which is very smart. In addition, the second part, what I was able to get done, thinking long term, because the worst thing we have, folks, are these gun shows. Has anyone ever been to a gun show? They're unbelievable, aren't they? I mean, I'm talking thousands of people, hundreds of tables, hundreds as far as the eye can see, with any kind of gun you want to buy, with big signs. We don't do background checks. So you can go any one of these in Virginia and buy any gun you want today, folks. Today, you could do this. Couldn't get, no background checks. But what I negotiated in the bill is there has to be state police now at every gun show in Virginia. It's not compulsory, can't get that done yet. But my sort of long-term thinking always was, at least they're there, and if you want to buy a gun, and the guy says you want to get a background check, we now can physically do it. You couldn't do it before. But I'm thinking, like, someone goes, buys a gun, commits a mass torturous act, you had the ability to get a background check, but you didn't get one, might be a legal theory we could use down the road on a tort claim. So I was just trying to think. So we were able to get all that done, but it's hard, Julie. But we will make progress. I'm telling you, all got to come out November, what are we, 3rd, 5th? What are we this year?
7.
Anybody know? Mark, you must know.
I have the calendar.
3rd or 5th, I think. But it's important.
This is an open-ended question for somebody in the audience, but we haven't talked about it yet. Your position on veterans issues. I mean, there have been a lot of issues, obviously, with the VA hospitals, but there might be other aspects of that you want to discuss.
It's a great question. Thank you for asking. I wish I'd mentioned it before. One of our other great proud things we're proud of under our term as governor is we made Virginia the most veteran-friendly state in America. We were the first state, believe it or not, in America to have ended veteran homelessness, functionally ended veteran homelessness in our state. It was a statewide effort headed up by my Secretary of Commerce. You never totally end veteran homelessness, as you know. There's a lot of mental issues involved and so forth. But when we started, we had like 3,672 veterans living homeless on the street. We were able to get every veteran, not in temporary housing, but in permanent housing. And it's called point in time. So we got to a point in time in Virginia where it was 0. But we set up this whole system, I think it's 777, I can't remember you dial this phone number and we'll come pick up any veteran. So we're very proud of that. I was always irate that the VA, the Veterans Administration, we have so many veterans in Virginia traveling around. 6 months. It took me a year. It took me 14 months to get a doctor's appointment. That's outrageous. These people have worn the cloth of the country. We promise them health care, and we're not giving it to them. And sometimes that long span of time could result in life or death. So I'm very proud, working with my legislature in a very bipartisan way. Actually worked with Kirk Cox and others on that. We are building 2 care centers. The first time a state is actually building its own facilities to provide for veterans, because I'm sick and tired of the VA not being able to do their job. So we led on that, but on education, I mean, all of the things we did, cyber vets, we have a whole program right here at George Mason, leads the country. You get one of my $88,000 jobs. So we have a whole thing to promote. We hired 30,000 veterans through our V3 program under my 4 years as governor. It was just historic. So I'm glad you asked the question, because here's the thing. You know, there's so many people moving out of active duty status that you want veterans to move to your state. So the more things you do, you sort of get that echo chamber going. Oh, Virginia's the best place to go. They give you all housing, they give you educational opportunities. And we now, the place for veterans where they want to go, which I'm very proud of. I'm the proud son of an Army captain in World War II. Ann and I are both proud parents of a Marine. We both have Marines right now. And, you know, it's just something special in Virginia, our military, because of all the bases we have. And it's really who we are. And I think it's something we're very proud of. But with that great honor, you know, I think we have a responsibility to give back.
I have another education question that's a little bit related to what we were talking about earlier, but puts kind of a finer point on it. It reads, majority white school districts enjoy $23 billion more funding than majority black districts. I don't know whether that's they're talking national anyway.
Is that state and county funding? It must be both. It has to be. Okay.
How might this disparity be corrected? If not, how can majority black
good
districts
question.
ever have a fair chance? But you started to talk about it when we were speaking about reparations.
Yeah, it's a good
How
question.
do you recognize that and start
And
to
we
change
tried.
that?
We started, and we need to do a lot more. It's got to be direct investment from the state. And here's the problem. So, you know, when Ann and I got into office, you know, we had the Petersburg School District. Wasn't every school was not accredited, Ann? Every single school was not accredited. Think of that. Okay, so where do they get a lot of their education funding? It's your property taxes, not just the state, but local, the property taxes. Well, who's going to move in to a community that doesn't have an accredited school? And if you're there, if you're fortunate enough to be able to move, you're moving out. So your tax base shrinks. So it is a horrible, horrible catch-22. That's why the state is the only one who has to do the right thing and invest more money. So we did a lot, we made a lot of progress, but golly gee, we got a long, long, long way to go. And this is important for Ralph, is this should be a top priority for him to make sure that, you know, really in Richmond and Petersburg and Norfolk, that we spend the money on the physical. And I was very proud of the budgets that Ann and I put out for education. Every budget, our two budgets, both had pay raises. You know, due to economic conditions, our teachers hadn't had pay raises in years. So we were losing good quality teachers to other states like Maryland. So you got to get more teachers. We did a thing to bring, you know, we have a real deficit of teachers in our state today. We need more teachers. So I remember, I think I sent out a letter to every retired teacher and said, please come back. This won't affect your retirement money. But, you know, we really got to, you know, we've got to get back where young people think that going into teaching is a great profession, which it is. And we just, somehow we've gotten out of that. And pay is some of it, but it's got, also you've got to have good school facilities and you got to be able to work in an environment that you can deliver for the children of what you want to do. And so the answer to the question is, in those really hard-hit areas, low-income areas, you're not going to do it. They can't raise their taxes at the local level. The property taxes have dwindled because people have moved out. The state has to do it. No other answer. And then really try to bring in federal money and grants and things to, you know, to do that.
Does that mean that's my last question, Mark, or do I have one more?
Then we're going to
One more
midnight.
question.
No, fine.
I do want to talk about North Korea before we close real quickly.
I had to pick up my son from tutor at 9, so. And it takes 15 minutes, so I'm putting you all in charge of that.
That means you'll have to talk even faster on this one. But you have spoken out.
I got a 16-year-old. I'll be honest with you. He thinks he's going to be a professional lacrosse player, so he does lacrosse all day. I said, Pete, come on. They pay you 19 grand a year. You got to get this education piece. So I've made him do a couple of these things. So.
Okay, so from lacrosse to North Korea.
Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying? Yeah.
I did want to ask about North Korea before we close, because you've spoken out.
I don't think they play it in North
both
Korea.
against, You've spoken out both against the outcome of the talks in North Korea and about the president's statement that he accepts Leader Kim Jong-un's assurance that he didn't know about what was going on with UVA student Otto Warmbier when he was being tortured in prison. You did take issue with the president's statement, and you obviously know the Warmbier family.
Yeah. I've spent time in the region. I was actually an ambassador over there for President Clinton in 1993. I spent almost a year in Korea. I know the issue, know the area very well, ran the trade mission over there. I mean, first of all, He never should have met with him, Kim Jong-un, never should have met with him until the people who actually are in charge of putting the policies together had a clear idea, because the only leverage you have was ultimately we will let you meet the President of the United States of America. He gave everything away. He went over there, they all glad-handed. We got nothing. We got absolutely nothing. And as you know, the Washington Post, a month after the big summit in Singapore, came out and said, no, they're adding more nuclear facilities. Remember, they had the map, the satellite map. He never should have met with them. It was a disgrace. And then he goes over and does, and listen, I don't mind a world leader getting together, but this was North Korea, who basically killed a UVA student out of Warm Bureau, let's be very clear. And I was outraged that the President of the United States, they killed this young man. Now, I dealt with the parents when I was governor. I talked to him because I was governor and he was at UVA. I talked to the father the day after he died, and he told me about his son coming off that plane where his teeth had been ripped out and all scars. So for the President of the United States to say, first of all, I believe Kim Jong-un when they said he didn't know about, nothing happens in North Korea without him knowing about it. And the idea that you have a U.S. resident, a student from UVA, he knew exactly what time this guy got up and went to bed. I mean, this was for him, a huge asset, hostage asset. So I was outraged at that, Julie. It's just outrage. The president continues to go against our best interests, let alone our intelligence agencies. He believes Putin more than he believes our intelligence agencies. He's in bed with Kim Jong-un over here, dissing our own intelligence agencies. The man, we know he's not fit to be president of the United States of America. I mean, folks don't say this lightly. At the end of the day, you want your president to be successful. This is not a Democrat-Republican thing. You want your president to be successful. I hoped when he came in, he'd be successful. I hoped he'd do infrastructure. I hoped he would have done what he promised on health care to make it more accessible in college. He didn't do any of that. He's tried to destroy NATO. Putin sit over there laughing. President Xi is laughing at him in China today. Look at the tariffs, $891 billion deficit last year in the merchandise. The worst deficit, the highest in 243 years. I mean, that's why, I'm just getting warmed up here, I apologize. I mean, but folks, think about this. I don't care what your political party is. He's ruined allegiances we've had forever in Europe and NATO. The tariffs have done horrible to Virginia farmers, I can tell you this. I know soybean farmers. You know how many soybeans they sold last year? 0. We had billions of dollars of contracts with China selling soybeans when I was governor. Billions, gone. You go out to the Midwest in Iowa and South Dakota, it's just, he's wreaking havoc on our country. He's divided our country. But I'll say this finally. Don't think he's going to be easy to beat. You know, he's got a solid base there, let it be 40%. A lot of the evangelical community supports him, which to me is shocking with his past. Cheating on all 3 wives and what's her name, Stormy and Betty and Lou, whatever. But you know why? One reason. He promised him he'd give him a justice of the United States Supreme Court that would overturn Roe v. Wade. That was the deal. Now he's got 2. And the frightening thing is about at the court level, in the court of appeals level, these young justices who are going to be there for a lifetime. So, but there's a long way from 40 or 42 to 50. If we're smart, but if we divide ourselves and we don't unify, I hope Howard Schultz does not run. If Howard Schultz, you're watching, you're the greatest coffee man of all time. You can destroy our chances. Just as you saw what happened with Hillary. Jill Stein took enough votes on the Green Party line to deny us in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. And that is a fact. And I still want to know why she was over having dinner with Putin in Russia. This stuff hurts us. So we got to come together. It's going to be a vigorous primary. going to be rough and tough, but at the end, we got to come together because it's about who we are and the things we believe in and where we think this country needs to go. I'm not an alarmist, but I've never seen the peril that our country is in today, that it be climate change, foreign relations. We're in tough shape today. Now, we're resilient, and we'll be back. But folks, we can't afford 8 years of this, and that's why it's important.
When you make that decision, call me first.
Deal.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Julie.
Great to talk
Great.
to you.
Hey. Julie, Governor, thank you very much. That was a great discussion and a wonderful closing statement. I can tell you're really prepared for it. So we have a reception right outside here, so
great.
everybody please join us and continue the conversation.